Hello everyone. Hope you all are good and hope that you have studied previous lectures thoroughly. We are going to continue with chapter 5 from part 2, accounting ratios and analysis. The seventh lecture for chapter 5, and let us see what we are going to do in today's lecture. Obviously, we are dealing with the same topic started in the previous lecture, solvency ratios. And from that, second and third ratio we are going to understand today. In the previous lecture, we have understood about debt to equity ratio, and on the basis of that, we have solved several illustrations. And I gave you homework, at least 3 sums, I think, for calculating debt to equity ratio. Yes, there are overall 4 solvency ratios. Firstly, debt to equity ratio that we have completed in previous lecture. Second is total assets to debt ratio that we are going to start for now. So, starting with the same, total assets to debt ratio. Yes, the topic is given in your textbook on page number 232. The second ratio in solvency ratios, total assets to debt ratio. Alright, total assets to debt ratio shows relation between total assets and non-current liabilities. Now, what are non-current liabilities? There is no need of explaining the same. Non-current liabilities we have understood while understanding the concept of debt equity ratio. What is included in non-current liabilities if we want to revise? It includes long-term borrowings and long-term provisions. So one thing is quickly solved and another thing is total assets. Total assets is the total of asset side. Yes? And the formula for total assets to debt ratio is total assets equals to non-current assets plus current assets upon long-term liabilities. There is no need of explaining long-term liabilities again, as we have understood it well and in detail while understanding the first ratio from solvency ratios, which is debt equity ratio. So the related points: to determine total assets, other non-current assets are not to be considered. Example, trade receivables of more than 12 months, expenses not written off. So these things are not to be considered while arriving at the amount of total assets, but not to worry, none of such topic or such item will be given in your question. To determine debt, non-current liabilities are to be considered, but other long-term liabilities are not to be considered. This also we have understood in the previous ratio. So moving ahead, the objective and trend, that as usual you will read, it is a part of theory. You know the formula, total assets upon total long-term liabilities, the second solvency ratio. Quickly starting with illustration 19. Given on page number 233 in your textbook. The question says, from the following information of U Limited, calculate total assets to debt ratio. So firstly, you should be clear with the formula. The formula for total assets to debt ratio is total assets upon long-term liabilities. Let us check the content given to you in the question. Share capital, reserves and surplus, non-current liabilities, current liabilities. Alright, the one ready thing available in this question is non-current liabilities, 10 lakh. Now you are supposed to find out total assets. But I think nothing here is related to the assets. Everything is about liabilities. So again you are supposed to use your common sense everything that appears to be on liabilities side, that is equity liabilities side, is mentioned completely here. Share capital, reserves and surplus, thereafter non-current liabilities and current liabilities. These many things are given on the equity and liabilities side in the balance sheet. So you can easily obtain the total of liabilities side of balance sheet. Yes? And the total of liabilities side and the total of assets side is always identical. So you can easily obtain total assets. Let us see the calculation and the explanation of course. Total assets are not given, but all items of equity liabilities side are given. Thus, the total of equity liabilities is total of asset side. You know this very well, the total of both the sides of balance sheet are equal. So the total of equity liabilities side is going to be the total of is going to be the total of asset side. Yes? Total of equity liabilities equals to total assets. So these are the items mentioned in the question. Share capital 30 lakh, reserves and surplus 5 lakh, non-current liabilities 10 lakh, current liabilities 5 lakh. So the total is 50 lakh, the total of equity liabilities, which is similar to the total of assets side, and hence 50 lakh, the total of liabilities side is considered to be the total of assets side also. So the amount of total assets is 50 lakh. So simply putting this figure in this formula gives you 50 lakh upon 10 lakh. 10 lakh is non-current liabilities given in the question. Total assets you have calculated here. Alright. So 50 lakh upon 10 lakh. 5:1. The answer is to be presented in terms of proportion always. Yes? So here we complete illustration 19, which was very easy and simple. As I said, you need to remember on nothing except for the formulas. And your basic concept of accounting should be clear. A 4-mark question will be asked, a 4-mark sum will be asked, in which there will be 2 marks for each sum. That they will be asking you 2 ratios. Yes, and of course the MCQ, VSQ. Yeah. Further, starting with illustration 20 given on page number 233 in your textbook. Yes. I repeat, on page number 233, illustration 20. From the following information of DV Company Limited, calculate total assets to date ratio. You are supposed to calculate total assets to date ratio. So firstly, you will write down the formula. Total assets to date ratio equals to total assets upon long-term liabilities. So let us find out total assets and long-term liabilities from the given question. This is the question given to you. Non-current assets, depreciation, current assets, share capital, reserves, total liabilities, current liabilities. Yes, let us see the solution. Total assets. Total assets is what? Non-current assets plus current assets. But in the given question, you are also provided with depreciation. And if you remember, depreciation is always calculated on non-current assets. And depreciation is to be deducted. Yes? So non-current assets are of 28 lakh as per the question, less depreciation 3 lakh. Depreciation is a non-cash expense, and if you remember, depreciation is always deducted from the price of an asset. So the value of non-current assets is 25 lakh. So non-current assets 25 lakh plus current assets 5 lakh. Current assets are also given in the question. So total assets are 30 lakh. No other item from this many things will appear in total assets. So we have obtained total assets 30 lakh. Now we are obtaining long-term liabilities. It is very simple. Total liabilities less current liabilities. Now again, if you remember the note that we have understood while understanding the debt equity ratio, it was clearly mentioned that whenever in the given question total liabilities are given and current liabilities are given, then to arrive at non-current liabilities, you will deduct current liabilities from total liabilities. And that is what we have done in the given question. We have deducted current liabilities from total liabilities. So 7 lakh minus 1 lakh, 6 lakh. You see? These are the total liabilities, these are the current liabilities. We are not in need of anything else. Yes? So simply putting this in the formula, 30 lakh upon 6 lakh gives you 5:1. 5:1, the answer presented in terms of proportion is the answer for total assets to debt ratio for illustration 20. Yes, the sums are extremely simple and easy. The next one, yes, so we have only two illustrations related to the second ratio of solvency ratios. The second ratio that we have understood, total assets to debt ratio. On the basis of that, we have done two illustrations, that is illustration 19 and 20. And now a sum of this kind, question 12, in exercise, calculate total assets to debt ratio, is given in the exercise. And that you are going to solve. Yes? I can give you the hint, total assets upon long-term liabilities, non-current minus current. I'm extremely sorry. Non-current liabilities are readily given, so you'll consider 4 lakh. And total assets, you will total all of this. Because the total of liabilities side and asset side is always equal. Alright, the sum is extremely simple. Yes? Fine then. So we are done with total assets to debt ratio here. You will write down the formula for this at least 5 times in your book, and also you will do the illustrations and this sum as homework. Fine. So our next ratio for the day is the third ratio in solvency ratios, that is proprietary ratio. Alright, I repeat, the third ratio from solvency ratios is proprietary ratio that we are going to start and will understand. So here it is, proprietary ratio, and the topic starts from page number 234 in your textbook. Yes? For this even we are having only one illustration to solve and a sum in exercise. The chapter is very simple and easy. So proprietary ratio. On page number 234, proprietary ratio shows relation between total assets and owner's funds. Again, you know both of this. You know total assets, you also know about owner's fund. That is shareholders' funds. Further, there are two approaches used to determine the owner's fund. Under both the approaches, owner's funds remain identical. Whichever approach you will apply, they say the answer remains same. Approaches of owner's funds: liabilities based approach, assets based approach. Yes, so ultimately, if you will see, they are obtaining shareholders fund by this liabilities approach, assets approach. Both of these approaches, this one and this one, we have already used this method for obtaining owners funds in previous sums and illustrations about first ratio. Yes, so in liabilities based approach, what you are going to do: equity share capital plus preference share capital plus reserves and surplus. You know this very well, that this is the formula for obtaining shareholders fund. Yes. Now assets based approach: total assets minus total liabilities. Non-current assets plus current assets is total assets. Non-current liabilities plus current liabilities is total liabilities. And equity equals to assets minus liabilities. So again you will obtain owner's funds this way. So under both the approaches, owner's funds remain identical. Yes, whichever approach you will apply, the answer obtained will be same. Right? Further, finally, talking about the formula of proprietary ratio, it says owner's funds upon total assets. Yes? Objective of this ratio shows what proportion of total assets is acquired by owner's fund. It is further assumed that remaining assets are acquired by borrowed funds. Obviously, to meet the financial requirements of the business, the funds need to be collected. Yes, the funds need to be invested in the business instead, I should say. So there are owner's funds and the remaining is assumed that they are borrowed funds. This ratio provides information of economic solvency and margin of safety to the creditors of business. The higher the ratio, higher the economic margin of safety, and lower the ratio, lower the economic margin of safety. The concept of theory that you will read as per the concept of theory that you will read on your own, the way you do with every ratio. Yes, this can be helpful for MCQ and BSQ. So finally, starting with the sum, illustration 21, given on page number 235. It says, from the following information of M Limited, calculate proprietary ratio. The question is presented on your screen, the one given to you in your textbook. You have information about equity and liabilities. You have information about assets. And they have not instructed on by which approach we are supposed to calculate proprietary ratio. So we'll use both the approaches, liabilities as well as assets. Right? This is the question. So, firstly, you will write down the formula. proprietary ratio equals to proprietor's fund, owner's fund upon total assets. Yes? To determine total assets, either liabilities based approach or assets based approach can be used. They've explained us both the approaches. Yes? Liabilities based approach, assets based approach. And this is the formula. Yes? So proprietor's fund 45 lakh. Yes? Here you can see, and also here. Proprietor's fund is nothing but owner's fund itself. And what is the formula for shareholders fund or owner's fund? It is equity share capital plus preference share capital plus reserves and surplus. So that is given here. Equity, preference, reserves and surplus. 45 lakh. So this is shareholders funds 45 lakh. Yes. And if you want to find out owner's fund with assets based approach, yes, the formula that is explained here. So you need to have total assets, total liabilities. Yes. So the information for that is given here. Non-current assets 50 lakh, current assets 20 lakh. So non-current assets plus current assets, total assets 70 lakh. Less non-current liabilities and current liabilities. Non-current liabilities 15 lakh, current liabilities 10 lakh. Yes? So that we have presented here as per this approach, assets based approach, the one that is presented here. And we have obtained the answer, and if you will see, the answer is same. 70 lakh minus 25 lakh gives you 45 lakh. Also here it is 45 lakh. Yes. So we have obtained shareholders fund. We have calculated on the basis of liabilities based approach and also on the basis of assets based approach. So 45 lakh is the answer for shareholders fund. Now talking about total assets. Total assets is 70 lakh, which is very clear here. In the given question, also 70 lakh assets. Yes, this is the balance sheet of the company. Yes, the balance sheet of company is this way. Yes, it is firstly equity and liabilities and then assets. You see the total is 70 lakh here and the total is 70 lakh here again. The total of assets and liabilities in the balance sheet should be identical. Yes. The balance sheet of the company is presented this way. This we'll learn in chapters that are still left from part 2. Because we have started directly with chapter 5, you might not be aware with the balance sheet of company. You only know about the balance sheet of sole proprietorship and partnership because we have understood final accounts for the same. Yes, and the final accounts of company. The company final accounts chapter 3 in part 2 is yet left to be explained. Yes, in that you will understand the balance sheet of this form. So putting these figures in this formula, of course, proprietor's funds upon total assets 45 lakh upon 70 lakh is 0.64:1. Yes. So total assets 1, 0.64 is from owner's fund. So remaining is borrowed funds as the point is indicated here. This ratio shows what proportion of total assets is acquired by owner's fund and further assumed that remaining assets are acquired by borrowed funds. Yes, so assume the total assets 1. Proprietors is 0.64:1, the proportion of proprietor's fund to total assets. If you will deduct this, you will obtain 0.36, which is assumed to be borrowed funds. All right. So with this we complete illustration 21 based on calculation of proprietary ratio. Little bit hard compared to the ratios we have done previously. Yes, you can say the first 4 ratios that we did, from that net profit ratio was little bit hard. The remaining 3 were comparatively easy. Thereafter, current ratio and liquid ratio were extremely easy. And thereafter, the ratios, that is total assets to date ratio, the solvency ratios that we have understood. Yes, there are 4 solvency ratios. Debt to equity ratio, total assets to date ratio. These 2 are extremely easy. And then we have started with proprietary ratio, which is comparatively little bit complicated but not that difficult. You are supposed to use the approaches taught to you and you can solve the sums easily. Yes. So question number 13 from exercise asks you to calculate proprietary ratio. Yes, you are provided with all the required information in this question and you will calculate proprietary ratio on the basis of same. Yes, you can see equity share, preference share, reserves and surplus. With this you will obtain owner's fund on the basis of liabilities approach. Yes, further on the information given to you ahead, non-current assets plus current assets, you will obtain total assets and you will deduct non-current liabilities and current liabilities from the same, and again you will obtain the answer for shareholders fund, which will be similar to the answer that you have obtained on the basis of liabilities approach. Simply you will write down the formula, you will put the figures that you have obtained, and the answer you know very well is to be presented in terms of proportion. Yes? So that's all. In today's lecture we have understood about proprietary ratio and total assets to date ratio. You will practice these ratios. You will write down the formula for both the ratios at least 5 times in your book and once in your fair book. Yes? You should keep learning all the formulas on daily basis. Yes? And you are not supposed to mix up any of the formulas. Yes? For each and every sum you are having different formula that you will apply, and it should be clear in your mind. Yes? So that's all. With this we'll complete the lecture for today. And of course your homework is sum number 12 from exercise and sum number 13 also from exercise. Yes, the previous one is for the calculation of total assets to date. Total assets to date ratio, and the sum number 13 is about calculation of proprietary ratio. Yes, please learn the formulas thoroughly and practice all the sums. We'll see you in the next lecture. Till then, stay home, stay safe and study well.